Okay, I think we're going to get started in a few minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We're going to bring the cardinals out. Thanks for being here. Wow, this is a full house. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's so good to see so many of our friends from the media here today. My name is Chieko Noguchi, and I'm the Executive Director of Public Affairs for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I want to first thank Monsignor Thomas Powers, the Rector of the Pontifical North American College, for hosting this press event. Monsignor and the faculty here at the college, along with the seminarians studying here who represent every corner of the United States, have been so welcoming, and it's a joy to witness the community's enthusiasm over the last 20 hours. We're so pleased to be joined this afternoon by the cardinal electors. We have 7 of them here. Closest to me is Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, Archbishop Emeritus of Galveston, Houston. We have Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark, Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago, Cardinal Wilton Gregory, Archbishop Emeritus of Washington, and Cardinal Robert McElroy of Washington. And then we're also joined by Cardinal Christophe Pierre, Apostolic Nuncio to the United States. Thank you, Your Eminences, for being here. Before we open it up for questions from the media, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to give a brief reflection on this great moment in the life of the Church. What does it mean to you that we have an American Pope?
Thank you very much. This is not my first conclave. I was in one 12 years ago. What I've discovered in both of them is they are both absolutely unique, since the cardinals come together to elect a successor of St. Peter. That's what they do. And with all of the comments that are made by others, they're all interesting. But we as cardinals elect a successor of St. Peter. Right now we elected someone, I'll be the first to be able to make this comment, who also is an American citizen. He's really a citizen of the entire world, since he has spent so much of his life, ministry, missionary work, and zeal for Christ in South America. He was also privileged to be the head of his religious order. So all things said, yes, he is American, and yes, he represents the big, big picture of the Church.
Chieko, thanks to you, and thanks to our extraordinarily effective United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and thanks for recognizing Monsignor Powers and the glowing hospitality of the North American College here, the American Seminary in Rome. Was my mic on? I better put that commercial in again if that didn't pick up. First of all, you're asking me about my impression. The impression is, and again, like Cardinal DiNardo, I was honored to be here 12 years ago, the amazing moment of enthusiasm, unity, hope, and promise. You were there in the square yesterday. Just the electricity. Nobody does drama like the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And all over, so I get a text from Charlie, my great-nephew, who was born the day Pope Francis was elected. Uncle Tim, we're all watching the white smoke. We're all cheering Pope Leo, and we're all crying. And please, we're glad you weren't Pope, so am I, so you can come back home. There's that enthusiasm from the mouth of a 12-year-old. Secondly, though, I would agree with Cardinal DiNardo. The fact that he was born in the United States of America, boy, that's a sense of pride and gratitude for us. I think he's a Peruvian citizen. I think during his missionary years in Peru, he so fell in love with the people. I think he was there 3 decades. Cardinal Tobin, and so he became a Peruvian citizen. He's a citizen of the world. He reminds us that we all have our true citizenship in heaven, as St. Paul taught us, and that is his role as universal pastor. Where he comes from is sort of now a thing of the past. You know, Robert Francis Prevost is no longer around. It's now Pope Leo. That's why Jesus changed the name of the first pope, right? You're no longer Simon. Your name is Peter. So he's a new person. He's our Holy Father. He's the successor of Peter. He's the father of the Church Universal. Where he came from, secondary.
Well, this is my first conclave and my first press conference after a conclave, and I think it's always great to bat third in the order because they put the really fast guys out in front of you. You know, so I had a moment to prepare, and I guess my first experience of the conclave was its starkness. You know, it's a meeting that's a lot more than a meeting that's coming. It happens after a period of mourning, which I don't think is really finished yet, but you know, a period of mourning and things that were part of our lives. Any device that could transmit was taken from us. Any connection with the wider world. Now we had that for a few weeks when we listened to each other talk about what each cardinal present, and not only the voting cardinals, but any cardinal that could still get into the meeting room, talked about for the weeks before the conclave. What does the church need? What's the world need? What are we hoping for? What are we dreaming about? So is starkness followed by expectation. Now we know something's going to happen eventually, and in some ways the voting is like watching a glacier move, but sometimes glaciers under stress move a lot. I really think that we were not simply counting on the forces that were within that room. We were remembering that it's the Holy Spirit who brings the church together. And it's the Holy Spirit who makes reconciliation possible. And it's the Holy Spirit who calls forth and indicates. And so we just needed to be sensitive to that. And then I saw that kind of reflected in the former Cardinal Bob Prevost, who I've known for about 30 years, worked with him. After one of the ballots, you know, you carry your ballot to the front of the hall, you deposit it, and you just say a few words in Latin to say, I'm standing before God, and Michelangelo reminds you of our ultimate destiny. And as best as I can say, this is the one that I think is indicated. Then I walked back and I took a look at Bob, and because his name had been floating around. And he had his head in his hands. And I was praying for him because I couldn't imagine what happens to a human being when you're facing something like that. And then when he accepted it, it was like he was made for it. He just, all of whatever anguish was resolved by the feeling that I think that this wasn't simply his saying yes to a proposal, but God had made something clear and he agreed with it. So it was kind of an interesting few days.
Well, I'm batting cleanup, and I hope this is my first conclave, and I hope my last. So viva el Papa. But one of the things that I come away with is, just imagine, we were over 130 people with different languages, cultures, backgrounds, from more than 70 countries. And within 24 hours, we were able to come to unity in making a decision. I hope that's a signal to the world that
we can reach across our differences in culture, language, country, nationality, and work together to solve the problems that are there, that we have the opportunity to reconcile and have peace. And I think it's instructive that Pope Leo began his message to people in the square by offering them the peace of Christ. So I saw this as really a spiritual experience of not only going through the motions of praying for the Holy Spirit, singing the Veni Creator, but actually having an experience of how we were able to treat each other with great respect, to listen to each other during the congregations beforehand. And then when it came time for voting, things seemed to just gel and go in a direction that set us on a path of unity. And that's what I really come away with from this experience. If only the rest of us in our lives and in the world could have that mad dash to unity that we seem to have in the conclave.
This was one of the most prayerful moments in my life, my first conclave, and I could not be more grateful that it happened in the Holy Year of Hope, that we are pilgrims of hope, something that Pope Francis had initiated. I felt comfortable saying to Pope Leo, from one South Sider of Chicago to another, I promise you my respect, my fidelity, and my love. It was just an amazing opportunity to see such a diverse assembly of humanity, obviously coming from many different perspectives, facing many different challenges, but coming together for a common purpose, to find Peter's successor. And I think we did well.
Do you have old pictures on your PC or smartphone? Then this video is for you. Nobody believed me at first, but now everybody wants one. My friends roasted me for...
As one who is very American in habits, tastes, and attitudes, I always thought it would be impossible to have an American pope in my lifetime. But I have to say, as we entered into the Sistine Chapel, it's a magnificent ethereal experience because we were coming in together 2 by 2. And the Litany of Saints was being sung to remind us that we're in union with all the saints who have come before us are in the kingdom of heaven. And at that moment, as we came in with the Last Judgment in front of us, that magnificent painting which brings to the fore the whole of humanity in all of its joy and accomplishment, in all of its hardship and struggle and failing. All sense of those divisions within the world fell away. And I felt we were looking at that moment into the souls of one another to find who should carry on this incredibly important mission at this moment in time. Some of you may remember John the 23rd called his autobiography The Journal of a Soul. And I really think in the discernment that went on and the prayer that went on, we were looking for the soul who has the capacity at this moment of time to really be a witness to Christ. And there was a great movement on the second day, a great movement within the body that was there. And it could be nothing other than the grace of God moving us toward this consensus, which I thought would have taken a lot more time to get to. And in thinking of Cardinal Prevost now, Pope Leo, what comes to mind is a phrase that was so much at the center of Pope Francis' pastoral ministry: missionary discipleship. That we are all called to be missionary disciples in the world, building the kingdom of God in the ways brought to us that we can in the lives we live out every day. And in a very real sense, Cardinal Prevost in his life has been at its core a missionary in every way. And in the great missionary tradition of the church, but also in his own life as a missionary within his family, within his religious community, within the parishes where he served, in the diocese where he served, and now for the world. And in a very real sense, we are in the city of the great missionaries of Christianity, Peter and Paul. If you ask, what were they citizens of? Paul was in a real sense a citizen of Tarsus and of Rome. Peter was a citizen of Galilee. But they each became missionary at their core and came to this place in Rome and gave their lives. And I believe that's what Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo, is doing and is at the heart of who he is and who he will be in the life of the church.
I've been the representative of 4 popes during my life. And from one minute to the other, he became my 5th pope. There is a continuity. It's wonderful. It happens in a few moments. Cardinal Prevost became the pope. What an extraordinary experience it was, you know, there is a famous sentence from a French poet, Charles Péguy, and he said, tout commence en mystique et tout finit en politique. You understand that, huh? Of course you do. And there is a few French journalists here. You will ask them to translate. You know, everything begins in, that's what Peggy said, you know, a kind of pessimistic but realistic vision of the reality. Everything begins in mystical and finishes in politics. What I experience is that everything begins in politics and finishes in mystic. This is what we lived, you know. We started like, you know, in this kind of confusion. The confusion of the languages, the confusion of the persons, the uncertainty of, because nobody told us where to go. You are together and you have to vote for the Pope.
Imagine making $453,000 in a single month as an affiliate marketer without relying on...
And there was no method. So, you know, the only method is the human method. To get to talk to one another, the dialogue, to listen to one another. At the beginning, let's be honest, we had difficulty to listen to one another because you know, you project your prejudice. You see the person as you think he is or she is. But at the end of it, you know, things became the process of discernment. I think a conclave is a moment of discernment. And everything starts in politics, and suddenly, as you said, you know, because we are in an atmosphere of prayer, I think which is so important. And we knew that ourselves, we could not resolve the problem. We cannot resolve the problem of diversity, the differences between groups, between persons. You know, I think the Holy Spirit has to help us. But the Holy Spirit is not a spirit floating over the people. The Spirit acts through us. And may I say, you know, at certain moment, and that was my wonderful experience, at a certain moment, I said, the Spirit is working. And we have Pope Leo. May I, if you, my brother's American, because, you know, I have the privilege to be French here. You know, everybody says an American Pope. But this man has spent most of his life in South America and in Rome. And you know, by the way, a pope from South America, in America of North today, is very important. Is that not? Is that not a prophetic gesture from God himself? You know, first and foremost, because he was a bishop of Chiclayo. You know, he is very well known. He's a South American bishop. Although, you know, he comes from the center of the world, Chicago, no? But another thing, have you heard about Cardinal Prévost? But Prévost is French, by the way. Prévost is French. Is that correct? And look at the genealogy of Prévost. It's very interesting. It's everything from South America, Haiti, Louisiana. Everything finishes in Chicago, but Chicago is not the end of the world. So that's Cardinal Prévost, a man from Chicago, becomes the Pope of the Universal Church. Thank God.
Thank you, Your Eminences. We can now take a few questions from members of the media. I have two seminarians on either side who have microphones. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will call on you and they will bring a microphone over to you. The first question goes to Lester Holt, NBC News.
Thanks very much. My question is to Cardinal Tobin. A lot had been talked about in the lead up about this larger number of cardinal electors, the fact that they were scattered from different parts of the world, didn't know each other. I want to ask you about the level of familiarity in the room, in the conclave.
Well, first, Lester, I'm glad you clarified what you meant by larger cardinals. I think if the conclave was limited simply to the conclave, then it would have been an even greater struggle. However, there were these 2 weeks following the funeral of Pope Francis where there was a daily and intentional getting to know you, and we listened to each other for the better part of that time. And it wasn't the first time that a lot of the cardinals had met those who were in the synod in 23 and 24. And not only knew, but they also had heard each other talk about what we thought was important. So I think the experience of the Spirit isn't a magical thing. We have to work at it, but sometimes it brings your life experience. It brings you to the edge of a cliff, and you say, "How can I get across?" And in listening to others, you say, "Oh my gosh, there it is. There it is. That's the way to go." So I think we had time that was not restricted to just a few days this week.
Okay. The next question goes to Terry Moran.
A couple of questions. First, during the meetings of the cardinals in the congregations, did Pope Leo, then Cardinal Prévost, did he have something to say that might have had an impact on the conclave? And then today, Cardinal Bo of Myanmar told ABC News, and I want to get his quote, that one of the reasons he's excited to have an American Pope is because he can build a bridge and find conversation and dialogue with President Trump. Do you think that was...
I don't remember any particular intervention that then Cardinal Prévost offered to the general congregation. But I do believe he engaged quite effectively in the smaller group conversations. As you can imagine, there are obviously, there were many other cardinals who were not voters, our senior brothers, who are also participants in the congregations, but a lot of dialogue occurred at mealtime, coffee break, those moments when you can engage one another in smaller groups. I did on one occasion talk to Cardinal Prevost, and we talked about Chicago, of course. But it wasn't that he got up and made this overwhelmingly convincing speech that just wowed the body.
I'll try both of those. One is that Cardinal Prevost's talk during the general sessions, I think what was important was not particularly the substance of what he said, but the manner with which he spoke. And that's key when we're looking at these questions. The key is, what is the manner a man is going to bring to this office, to this role? Secondly, I think the impact of him being an American was almost negligible in the deliberations of the conclave, surprisingly so for me. I'm a newer cardinal, and I talked to many of those who are from different places, many far-flung, because you know Pope Francis made cardinals in the peripheries. That was a particularly important witness. And what surprised me was the real absence of that being a key question at all in this conclave.
So, maybe I think we should not forget that he has had a very important position in the Curia for a couple of years already, you know. He was the head of the Congregation of Bishops. So he's also known, for his actuation. He has begun, and he has been chosen by Pope Francis. You know. There is also, I think, a kind of continuity. I think he has a deep understanding of who Francis was, and so there is I think this element certainly have had their importance for the choice of this new Pope.
Okay, next question, towards the center aisle here. The lady in the aqua jacket. I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking on your name.
My name is Delia Gallagher. My question, please, is to Cardinal Dolan and Cardinal Gregory. To what extent is it correct to interpret the election of Pope Prevost as a reflection of the desire of the cardinals to offer a counterweight to the global influence of President Trump? Thank you.
I would back up what Cardinal McElroy said. I don't think the fact that Cardinal Prevost was from the United States had much weight. I like the comment of the gentleman who just spoke. It should not startle us that we would look to Pope Leo as a bridge builder. That's what the Latin word pontiff means. He's a bridge builder. Will he want to build bridges to Donald Trump? I suppose, but he would want to build bridges with the leader of every nation. So I don't think at all my brother cardinals would have thought of him as a counterweight to any one person. I don't know if that's ever been true in the history. Perhaps in 1978, perhaps the election of Karol Wojtyła as a counterweight to the communist hegemony would have been a little more apt. But I don't see anything like that now. He would look forward to meeting and very soon, within 10 days, he'll begin almost daily meeting with leaders of the world who will come for rather substantive discussions. I presume one of them down the line would be the President of the United States. would that be of more heft than the other ones? I don't think it would in his eyes.
I didn't sense in the conversations that I had with the other cardinals of the world that the conclave was seen as a continuation of the American political election. Obviously, the cardinals were quite aware of things that have occurred in the United States, statements that have been made, political actions that have been taken. But what the cardinals were concerned about primarily, at least from my conversations with them, was who among us can bring us together? Who among us can strengthen the faith and bring the faith to places where it has grown weak, bring the faith to places where there seems to be less enthusiasm or appreciation of the common things that draw us together. So it wasn't an election conclave. It was a desire to strengthen the Christian faith among God's people.
Okay. Next question goes to Maurice DeBall.
Best and worst breakfast for your waistline.
Eggs? If you're going to get eggs, these are the kind to get the pasture-raised.
1, 2, 1, 2. I'm wondering, let's start with Cardinal Cupich here. What do you think the impact of this papacy will be on Catholics in America, on the church in America? I don't know if you saw the spontaneous reaction yesterday. People were chanting USA, USA in St. Peter's Square. And at the same time, some others have said, baby, pump the brakes here. This is the least American of all the cardinals. Where do you think this papacy is going to lead Catholics in America?
I believe that he will have a special platform given his experience of living in the United States, but also living in another country, a missionary country like Peru, but also here in Rome, to have Catholics take a second look at the teachings of the church that have to do with the social gospel. Picking the name Leo is indicative, I think, of the direction he wants to take. The great reformer, he was the first modern pope that we've had after Pius IX, who wrote stirringly about the rights of workers, of immigrants, of those who were living at the margins of society. So I think it will give him a platform to reintroduce Rerum Novarum, the works of the church since Rerum Novarum and Leo XIII. And I think he will be able to put it in language that's comprehensible and also challenging to Catholics in the United States. So that's what I'm looking for. I think that's the promise that we saw yesterday on the balcony, and also the promise in the name that he chose.
I agree with Cardinal Cupich that what is happening with the election of Pope Leo is this man is aware historically of where we are, where we all are. And Pope Leo XIII was an important figure in the history of the most recent church to actually speak about it in a very concrete way about Rerum Novarum, of the new things. And that was about industry and about the speculation of things that made workers live in difficulties. So I think Cardinal is right. That's one thing that he'll have for us. But I want to take him back to Leo the Great, because I live in the 5th century. Leo the Great was a pope at the time when the church was truly a mess in dealing with what was happening right around the city gates of Rome. And remember, Pope Leo is the Bishop of Rome, and that's what makes him Bishop of the whole church. And Pope Leo managed to pull off a number of things relative to saving the city, helping the city, and at the same time, he preached Christ crucified, and he preached him as truly Son of God, and truly, as his phrase is, also consubstantial with us. Jesus is truly one of us. I think Pope Leo is a wise, wise man, and he picked someone whose name has multiple figures from Leo the Great to Leo the 13th, all of whom can speak to us both in terms of social doctrine and in terms of doctrine of who Jesus is. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'd like to call on a print reporter, Joshua.
I'm Joshua Mackel with Reuters. Thank you so much. Something I think many of you saw, or we all saw in Pope Francis, was that he was a very free man. He kind of knew who he was, and he spoke very plainly and very openly, I think sometimes in ways that might have caused you all some trouble. And I wonder how you see, well, Pope Francis spoke very freely also about the situation in the U.S. church and in U.S. politics. He addressed President Trump pretty directly. He called the plan to deport millions of migrants a disgrace. I'm wondering if you think Pope Leo is the same kind of free man, if he might speak in those kinds of terms about what he sees as problems with the U.S. political system. And do you hope or want that President Trump might come for the inauguration of the Petrine Ministry here in Rome?
100%.
Why not? Why not?
I would say on the question of, is there the same type of freedom in his heart and soul that was in Pope Francis? I believe yes. But that's different from asking, is he going to express that freedom in the same exact manner or the same pathways and contours that Pope Francis did? It was said many times in the general sessions leading up to the conclave, and I think I could say this much without giving anything away. We're looking for someone following the pathway of Francis, but we're not looking for a photocopy. And I believe Pope Leo will not be a photocopy of Pope Francis. I do believe he'll be just as genuine, but he'll have a different manner in expressing that and bringing the gospel into the church and into the life of the world.
I think it's important, too, to remember that when we have the appointment of a bishop in the church, we don't talk about a replacement. We talk about a successor. That's a very important distinction to make. And that is what we were looking for as well. Who could bring forward not only the ministry and life and tradition of Francis, but everything that preceded him, especially in that pivotal moment in the life of the church at the Second Vatican Council. So we were looking for not a replacement, but a successor.
We are unsurprisingly very, very eager to find out about the man, Pope Leo. Pope Leo, rightly so. I am, we are, you are. His personality, his temperament. Of course, it's the office of the successor of St. Peter that endures. This wasn't our first rodeo. We've been through this 268 times, okay? And the church goes on. Did you detect yesterday, you were there, we bishops were behind the drapes, but we could hear, the most ecstasy from the crowd is when the announcement was made, I bring you good news, habemus papam. We have a pope. Ecstasy, enthusiastic applause. They didn't know who it was. As a matter of fact, they said, we don't really care. We have a pope. The chair is no longer empty. There will be a man at the window on Sunday. We have a pope. Papa is back, all right? Now, that doesn't that doesn't eradicate our desire to find out the personality of this current pope. But it's that office of the successor of Peter that is supreme. And each one, you got to make gnocchi with the dough you got, as our Italian friends will say. So obviously the personality and the temperament will have a lot to do with it. But boy, oh boy, it's that office, it's that charism, it's that dovere, as the Italians say, that sacred duty and responsibility that is really of the essence.
I also think that it's important in looking at Pope Leo to give him space to grow into the office. He's never been Pope before. And so while he comes with a rich heritage, a missionary heritage, a religious heritage, he's going to grow into the office and seize opportunities that perhaps were not ever seen in his life before. There's a tendency for all of us to believe that we can capture tomorrow by looking at yesterday. And I think that Pope Leo will surprise us as he brings his gifts and confronts the challenges and responds in grace to the needs of the church.
I think that Cardinal Wilton has a very important point. With the news cycles, we have to know every bit about Pope Leo now. He's less than 24 hours old as Pope. Give him a chance to reveal his personality, and you and others who are in the media can do that just watching his actions and his talks and the way he engages people. I'd like to see it develop more before we suddenly make judgments.
Joshua, thinking about your question.
Big retailers don't want you to have this zoom lens, but there's nothing they can do to stop it. So there's this new super powerful...
We all heard, before we started voting, a rather extensive conference that was given by somebody I think you probably remember, Father Cantalamessa, now Cardinal Cantalamessa, who's I think around 90 years old, but still a very dynamic and thoughtful speaker. And he, towards the end of his conference, he gave advice that all of us heard, just in case. Advice to the one who's going to be elected. And he said, be yourself. Now, lest that seem to be just simply a life as a selfie attitude, I heard it in terms of a novel that really fascinated me at different times in my life, called Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. And in it, this wise teacher is tutoring two princesses, this tribe, and one was very bright, very rational, is questioning about the gods, because it's set in pre-Christian Greece, or Macedonia, really. And the princess says, why won't the gods come to us? But by this time in the novel, you realize the author's talking about God. Drop the S and make it a capital G. And he says, the gods will not come to us until we have a face. They don't want to waste their time talking to masks. So I think Pope Leo heard that call as Bob Prevost, and he's going to carry it out with the gifts of grace and nature that God's given him. So I don't think there's a worry about him being a carbon copy of anybody.
Okay. The next question goes to Lauren Green, Fox.
One of the things that's very apparent about Pope Leo XIV is that he seems to be a combination of Pope Francis and Pope Benedict, like the missionary aspect of Pope Francis, but sort of the mind, the theological mind of Pope Benedict because of his doctorate in canon law. Is this what attracted you to him, besides his manner, but just the resume?
Lauren, I think you're onto something. I'm glad I'm sitting next to Cardinal DiNardo. You see, Robert Francis Prevost is an Augustinian. Augustine is the representative of perhaps the most towering intellect in Western civilization. In philosophy and theology, you don't have to go to a Catholic or Christian university to study Augustine. He's studied by everybody. And so that could be the rock of an intellect that would remind us a bit more of Pope Benedict, right? But yet, right, he's filled with that missionary zeal and fervor that the cerebral life is fine, but unless it sinks to the heart, takes over the soul, and can be expressed credibly and in a compelling, colorful way through the mouth, it ain't going to accomplish much. And so, yes, that might be the combination there of with Pope Francis. Way to go.
Next question.
Hi, Mary Calvi. I have a question for Cardinal Dolan and Cardinal Tobin. Cardinal Dolan, before you were sequestered, you told me that you were hoping for a pope who had pastoral experience within a diocese, in a church community, a gifted linguist, and a person with Vatican experience, but maybe not a Vatican lifer. And that certainly described Cardinal Prevost. So I was wondering from you and also from Cardinal Tobin, when you were going in to the conclave, did you have an idea in your head that Cardinal Prevost would be the next pope? And also on the subject of gnocchi, how was the food in the conclave?
Oh. Well, Mary, thanks for reminding me of what I had said in our enjoyable interview. I think it was back at home. Thank you. And yeah, that means a lot to us. It means a lot to us cardinals that you would have a pastor. Pastor is the Latin word for shepherd. Jesus, this Sunday, we're going to celebrate Good Shepherd Sunday when Jesus says, I'm the Good Shepherd. We look for somebody who's a good shepherd, a good pastor. And that usually is translated into that part of his curriculum vitae would be extensive pastoral experience. Lord knows Pope Francis had it.
Watch what eggs do to your brain. What's growing inside your brain right now could be wiping out your memories as we speak. Memory loss is completely reversible. You may not realize it, but the real reason behind frequent forgetfulness has nothing to do with age or stress. And
Lord knows Pope Leo XIV has had it. That usually means parish or diocese, although a good priest and a good bishop is a good shepherd wherever he is assigned. Okay, Cardinal Pierre has spent most of his life in the diplomatic service of the Holy See, maybe not in a parish or diocese, but he's still a good shepherd. But we would look to that, Mary, very, very much. The food, let's just say it was a good impetus to get this over with. All right?
And I could follow by first verifying what Cardinal Dolan said, because last night they had an incredible meal. As I said, they've been holding back, till we got the job done. But I do remember being so shocked the day after Easter, getting the word about 5 o'clock in the morning of Pope Francis's death. And as I was shaving later that morning, I was listening to a segment on the BBC in which Cardinal Bo, who was mentioned from Myanmar, was being interviewed. And towards the end, the journalist, with the customary discretion, said, without violating any secrecy, do you have some candidates in mind? And Cardinal Bo surprised me by saying, well, yes, there's one or two I've been thinking of. And I said, Joe Tobin, you got a candidate in mind? And I said, absolutely not now. And I don't think it's just laziness. There are other things I probably could do more promptly. I needed to listen to, especially these discussions before, as I valued what happened in the synod so much, because it was an opportunity not simply in Rome to listen, but in all places in Newark, New Jersey. And I came to that synod with a lot clearer ideas of what I heard from the 16,000 or so people that participated. So I think that I would imagine there was one or two that came with somebody else in mind and changed because of what they heard from people. So thank you.
Okay. Well, we are running a little short on time. I'm going to give one last question to a Catholic outlet. I'm going to call on Cindy Wooten with Catholic News Service.
I was wondering, particularly Cardinal Tobin, you were superior of the Redemptorists when Pope Leo was superior of the Augustinians, I think. And so you were in Rome at the same time together. And then you were in the Curia, and he was, I think, in his order and then bishop. And now you serve on the dicastery for bishops that he was the head of. How would you describe the way he works and administers and kind of runs things? What have you noticed about his personality, how he handles difficult challenges, difficult personalities?
Well, there's a lot of questions there, Cindy. Let me take a couple of them. Yes, we did work together on a number of projects, and we had similar experiences in the sense that as Superior General, you live about half of the year in this city, and then half of the year in other places. And I think that has to have an effect on you. It's much like in the United States. If you're privileged to work in another culture other than the one you were raised in, you have to change. I remember a Spanish priest at a meeting in Brooklyn, of all places. It was a conference on the particular forms of worship that Latin Americans feel most at home. And at lunch he said, "I feel sorry for you." And so I'm bracing myself, for whatever he feels sorry about. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're working with these people and you're not one of them." I said, "But I feel like I'm one of them, and I really find life doing what I do." He said, yeah. He said, "But it's like taking a pine tree out of the northern forest and planting it on the beach in Puerto Rico. The pine tree can grow, but it has to change." And so, it's not like a schizophrenic split personality, but it's more like a broadening experience. And I think Bob has had, or Pope Leo has had that, And so he's learned to think different ways. He's learned not only languages. Language is just one cultural indicator. In fact, there's some other things that are even more important. And that's going to serve him well. And yes, he's navigated the corridors around in Rome, and that'll serve him well. I don't think he's one that likes to pick fights with people, but he is not one to back down if the cause is just. And I guess the last thing I'd say about Bob is that he really is a listener, and then he acts once he's heard. So he has a lot of courage, and I just thanked him yesterday when it was my turn for saying yes to such an awesome responsibility.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Eminences, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media, for your participation today, and thank you, Monsignor Powers and the Pontifical North American College, for hosting us today. Have a good evening, everyone.